Everybody, and welcome back to this online MBA in Marketing Management. We're now in session number 9 regarding the area of management policy and strategy. So in this module, it's all about understanding how to analyze a corporate portfolio. So what we'll be looking at in this particular session is the business portfolio analysis, so understanding what we mean by synergy and dyssynergy. We'll be looking at the BCG matrix, the Boston Consulting Group matrix. We'll be looking also at the 9-cell model and exploring a little bit more in depth what we mean by the concept of stretch, leverage and fit. So what do we mean by business portfolio analysis? So here's a definition to explain this in more detail. So really, this is really about analysing the elements of a firm's product mix to determine the optimum allocation of its resources. And the two most common measures used in a portfolio analysis are market growth and relative market share. So the strategic units that make up the company and the attempts to evaluate current effectiveness and vulnerabilities, that's another way of putting it. And business portfolio management enables strategic planners to select the optimal strategies for the individual products while achieving overall corporate objectives. So when a business portfolio comprises multi-business units and perhaps operates at multi-locations, then the strategist often has to ask two questions to take a decision on business strategy. And those questions are as follows. So firstly, needs to think about how much of our time and money should we spend on our best products to ensure that they continue to be successful? And how much of our time and money should we spend developing new costly products, most of which will never be successful? So examples of portfolios that we may have come across, if you think about it, companies such as Unilever obviously has a whole broad spectrum of goods and services and products in its its range. So things such as ice cream, tea and spreads. Procter & Gamble offers detergents and nappies. Gillette, batteries, shaving products. An organisation like Virgin, which operates in the area of public transport, so things such as trains, planes, but also Coca-Cola and music stores. Companies such as Wipro offer computers, vegetable oils and soaps, and ITC, which offers tobacco, soaps and biscuits. So we can see that some of these portfolios are extremely far-reaching. So when we talk about business portfolio analysis, it's basically an analysis of the corporation as a portfolio of different businesses with the objective of managing it for return on its resources. So portfolio analysis looks at the corporate investments in different products or industries under common corporate jurisdiction. So it involves analysing future implications of the present resource allocation and continuously deciding, adding, curtailing or disposing operations or products so that overall portfolio balance is maintained or improved. Portfolio analysis takes into consideration aspects such as the company's competitive strength, how it allocates its resources, its patterns and its industry characteristics. All businesses have to balance three basic aspects of running the business. That's net cash flow, state of development and risk. So as we mentioned at the beginning, we talked about what we're going to cover in this session. We mentioned the BCG or the Boston Consulting Group growth share matrix, and you can see that represented here. So we can see that this matrix is separated into 4 quadrants, and the two areas of interest, or the two axes, are really to do with relative market share, so whether that's high to low in terms of how much cash is generated, and then market growth rate and how much cash is used, which goes from low to high. So I'll explain that in a little bit more detail. So this BCG growth share matrix shows that different businesses form the business portfolio and can be characterized by these two parameters. So as we just looked at, you've got the company's market share for the business, which represents the firm's competitive position, and then you've got the overall growth rate of the business. And for each activity in the portfolio, a separate strategy must be developed depending on its position in this 2x2 matrix. So higher market share will mean higher profits and higher cash flows. Relative market share is defined as the market share of the relevant business divided by the market share of its largest competitor. So, for example, it could be 10%, 20%, 60%. Then A's relative market share is 1/6 and C's share is 3. So higher growth rate will mean profitable investment, expansion opportunities, and easier to increase market share. Earned cash can be ploughed back, therefore, to enhance return on investment. So this Boston Consulting Group growth share matrix has a methodology to it, and really it's a step-by-step procedure which develops the business portfolio matrix and identifies, therefore, the appropriate strategies for different businesses. So we can classify various activities of the company into different SBUs, which we came across in other sessions, strategic business units. And for each business segment, we can then determine the growth rate of the market and plot it on a linear scale. We can compile assets employed for each business segment and then determine the relative size of the business within the company. It will also enable us then to estimate the relative market shares for the different business segments. And this is done on a logarithmic scale. And another thing that's important when using the matrix is to then plot the position of each business on a matrix of business growth rate, as we saw, versus relative market share. So here's an illustration of actually putting the BCG growth share matrix into practice. So as we see, we've got the business growth rate here from low to high and the relative market share. And then we've got these 4 distinct quadrants which are categorized in terms of stars, question marks, dogs, and cash cows. And we can also then see that when we talk about a product life scale, we can see that this is really going to, or life cycle rather, it's really determined by different distinct phases. So when a product comes into the market, it's introduced, and over time then it starts to grow, it then starts to mature, and then over time it will start to decline. And of course, accordingly, we'll see our sales growth rate depending on which phase of maturation the actual product is in its life cycle. So the strategies then, according to the product life cycle, are around expansion strategies. So we looked at a minute ago in the Boston Consulting Group matrix, this area of stars. So stars are the businesses which have both high growth rate and high market share. At times, they are not self-sufficient in cash flow, but need to be supported in view of their potential. So this is what we would call the growth phase of a product life cycle, or PLC. And such businesses generate as well as use large amounts of cash. So the star generates high profits and represents the best investment opportunities for growth. So we need to reaffirm the company's competitive edge at this phase by sufficient doses of resources for expansion. And the best strategy regarding stars is to make necessary investments and consolidate the company's high relative competitive position. And this could be, for example, in the business area of tiles or electronics and communications, pharmaceuticals. These are all what we'd call star industries. Then you have what we call the cash cows. So this is the hold strategy. And the cash cows are the businesses with low growth rate but high market share. So high market share leads to high generation of cash and profits. A cash cow is a business that generates cash flows over and above its internal needs. Cows can be milked to provide a corporate parent with funds for investing in star or cash dog businesses, financing new acquisitions or paying dividends. Cash cows provide the financial base for the company. A strong cash flow resulting out of relatively high market share and low market growth rate, cash cow opportunities should be able to maintain market share at or around existing levels. So in this state of business, corporate can adopt mainly stability strategies. So expansions and investments can be thought only if the long-term prospects are exceptionally bright. So these are generally mature businesses reaping the benefits of experience and expertise. Funds generated are to be used for question mark or star businesses, as cash cows are destined to slow down. A phased retirement, therefore, needs to be planned. And then with the build strategy, as we saw in the matrix, that's where we've got the question mark. So the build strategy is the question mark. And the businesses with high industry growth but low market share are known as these question marks. And in business, these are the ones where question mark opportunities need investment in order to grow and gain market share. So because of their high growth, the cash requirement is high, but due to their low market share, cash generation is low. And these are sometimes known as problem children, as someone who has huge potential but not kind of clicking. So here a large amount of cash flow is required to stabilise and enter into star phase, and companies must obtain early leads to strengthen the business and capture growth opportunities. A question mark business can either become a star or can go to dogs depending upon funds and competitive edge. And then that moves us on to dogs. So the business that's called dogs, if the business growth rate is low, and also the company's relative market share is low, the lower market share means poor profits, and as market growth is low, any investment is prohibitive, as cash demanded will exceed the cash generation, causing negative cash flow. Under such circumstances, the strategic solution is to either liquidate or, if possible, harvest or divest the dog business. So when we talk about a harvest strategy, this is really about developing short-term cash flow, irrespective of the long-term damaging effect to the product or business. This strategy is appropriate for any weak products where disposal in the form of a sale is unavailable or not preferred due to high exit barriers. Or you have the divest strategy. So to change the capital of the business and allow resources to be used elsewhere of industries that have a very slow or negative market growth rate and where a company has low market share. These are products in late maturity or declining stage, as mostly substitutes start taking over these products. So what happens is, because they are in this late maturing or declining phase, they are then substituted by other products. And therefore they stop generating large amounts of cash and face a cost disadvantage owing to low market share. And sometimes, to reduce the high costs involved, a retrenchment strategy is also adopted. So as we can see here, we've got cows, stars, dogs and questions, and we look at in terms of how much cash source is available, how much cash use, and then what the net cash balance is. So cash source is more for the cows, but cash use is less, and therefore let's milk and deploy because there are funds available. Whereas compare that with, for example, the question marks, cash source is low and their cash use is more. So funds need to invest selectively to improve competitive position. So we can see that we can map these different types of businesses against their cash source and their cash use, and it will tell us what we need to do in terms of our strategies that we need to employ. So what are the limitations of the BCG matrix? So the BCG matrix obviously is very useful, but there are certain things which do restrict it. And one of the things that restricts it is that actually predicting profitability from growth and market share, this matrix is assuming that profit depends on growth and market share. And this may not be 100% true. So industry attractiveness may be different from simple growth rate and the firm's competitive position, which may not be reflected in its market share. Also, it can be difficult to determine market share. So BCG has heavy dependence on market share as indicated as an indicator of its competitive strength. And the calculation of market share depends on how we decide what is total market. Sometimes we may have to consider niche market for analysis. Further limitations, that there's no consideration for experience curve synergy. So in the BCG model, each quadrant is viewed independently. Low cost due to expertise of employees can prolong dog, star or cash cow strategies. There's also a disregard for the human aspect. It does not recognise the fact that actually cash generated in one business gets associated with the power of the concerned manager. So cash cow unit may actually be reluctant to part away with its cash to other businesses in the house. Strategic options given by the Boston Consulting Grid Matrix may not be able to be implemented. So when we talk about synergy versus dysynergy, what we're talking about here is where we've got the whole is greater or lesser than the sum of its parts. So 1 + 1 could be 2 or 11 or 1 or 111. So this effect is known as synergy. So in any organization, resources, strengths, weaknesses, behaviors, they do not exist independently, but they act together. So if these strengths and resources and behavior in the organization are directed properly, then a synergistic effect could be seen. And the organization should cultivate win-win and open communication with the philosophy of seek to understand first and then to be understood. In such an atmosphere, 2 or more strong points add up to something more than its arithmetic sum. And this is synergy. Similarly, 2 or more weaknesses acting in tandem can damage more than its arithmetic sum. So this is dysynergy. So if functions like product, pricing, distribution and promotion all work in harmony and support each other, then hopefully we would see a synergistic effect in marketing. And similarly, if marketing and production areas support each other, then this effect could also be seen in operating efficiency. Marketing inefficiencies could result in reduction or operating efficiency as a dysynergistic effect. So synergistic effects are results of quality and type of internal environment existing within the organisation. These effects will only lead the organisation to develop competencies and ward off external threats. So General Electric or McKinsey's 9-point multi-factor portfolio planning matrix is another way of understanding, another model to kind of give understanding to this topic of business portfolio analysis. So different businesses in the organisation as strategic business units can be rated for the purpose of strategic planning. And 2 parameters are considered based on internal appraisal of all the SBUs and done individually. So this is looking at the 2 parameters. One is industry attractiveness. How attractive is the industry? This depends on business strengths. So things such as industry potential, current size, rate of growth, structure and profitability. This is generally highly profitable, a productive arena where the firm would like to deploy the best of everything. Similarly, a less attractive business is kept with little attention or is for grabs, i.e. for divestment. And then the other parameter that it measures, it looks at the company business strengths. So company business strengths is a product of several factors like the company's current market share, growth rate, differentiation, strength, brand image and corporate image. So we can see here how this looks. This is GE's 9-point model where we've got the attractiveness of the industry plotted against the company business strength. Low, medium, high and strong, medium to weak, and then will tell us which of the following strategies we should employ. And we can see that in a little bit more detail here, where you then start to plot what we call winners and losers and question marks and average businesses. And the circle denotes the size of the industry, while the blue colour it corresponds to the market share. So the vertical axis, as we saw, represents industry attractiveness, and this is weighted composite rating based on 8 different factors, and those factors are size of the market, rate of growth of sales and cyclicality, industry profit margin, competitive intensity including vulnerability to foreign competition, seasonality, economies of scale, susceptibility to technological obsolescence, and entry conditions such as social, legal, environmental and human impacts. The horizontal axis in this General Electric business screen model represents business strength competitive position. So this is a weighted composite rating based on 7 factors, which are relative market share, profit margins, ability to compete on price and quality, knowledge of customer and market, competitive strengths and weaknesses, technological capability, and the caliber of management. So these two composite values for industry attractiveness and business strength are there, as we've just seen, are then kind of plotted for each business in a company's portfolio. And the pie charts denote the proportional size of the industry. So the white colour and blue segment represent company share. So yes, sorry, the blue segment represents company share, the white colour represents the proportional size of the industry. So as we've seen then, we can see here that you then get various weightings and ratings and a score against those factors: growth rate, location, management skill, etc. And that will give you a scoring of the company's competitive position. And then we can actually perform what we call a gap analysis. So we've got here performance, with where we want to be and where we are at the moment, so the desired performance and the achieved performance, and we can see there's a discrepancy between where we need to be and what we've actually achieved so far. So this is done for focusing on strategic alternatives. So on the dimension of time, various alternatives are evaluated in different phases to get a clearer picture for selection of strategies. So what is the result of the present strategy? Should we choose a new strategy? What should be the methodology of implementation? If the gap is narrow, policy is to stabilise the strategies. If the gap is due to consistent past bad performance, which is also expected in the future, then retrenchment or withdrawal strategies may be more suitable. So when we're conducting a gap analysis, the first step is to identify alternatives. Companies find it difficult to change their strategies because strategic thinking is not necessarily the core competency of managers. Hence, lots of brainstorming and situational analysis needs to be done. A correct definition of the problem is the second step, and a hypothesis is developed after brainstorming and situational analysis. And this hypothesis must be tested to develop clear understanding of the forces that actually work. Then we need to formulate the strategy and address the driving forces in a cause and effect relationship, finding the 80-20 Pareto principle and attacking the most important one, and then prioritising the strengths and a plan for the projects to implement strategies on a timescale, which will be created for future guidance and analysis. So some more important terms which we talked about in the agenda for this session is from fit to stretch. So if we talk about fit, we talk about vertical fit. So if a business house has a strategy to be cost-effective leader in the business, then resources and activities in all functional areas are to be focused on adopting low-cost structures and reducing costs. So when all functional areas like marketing, finance, operations, HR and information management, etc. contribute to this objective to create a low-cost structure, then it is a congruence, there's a match of these functional strategies and coordination between functions operating at different levels in the organisation towards a common objective. And this matching or congruence is known as vertical fit. And then you have horizontal fit. So along with vertical fit, there is a need to have congruence and coordination amongst all the different activities taking place at the same time, and that's what we call horizontal fit. So this is more about operational implementation. It's an approach adopted by organisations to achieve operational effectiveness, and all functions operate optimally by performing value-creating activities. This is also a value chain. To support value chain activities, various staff function departments are involved and put along operations. For example, the procurement department is placed along with the operations department. So what do we need to be aware of? So when we're talking about the strategy and structure for generating results in organisations, the strategic or the traditional strategic planning seeks a fit between resources and aspirations. So we set realistic goals based on what we think we can achieve with the resources at hand, and then construct strategies and tactics to achieve them. So fit means positioning the firm by matching its resources to its environments, as we saw earlier in the session previously with a SWOT analysis. It may be a compromise formula with regards to the firm's objectives and a competitive posture of the company. Strategy as stretch and leverage, so we've talked about fit, and let's talk about these two terms, Hamel and Prahalad's 1993 assertion that competitiveness is born in the gap between a company's resources and its manager's goals has entered the mainstream of strategy thinking. So this is what we mean by stretch. So Hamel and Prahalad began their deconstruction of conventional wisdom by challenging common understandings of the meaning of strategy. And they added this dual concept of stretch and leverage to strategic intent. So stretch is a gap between resources and aspirations. It's actually diametrically opposite to fit. And the concept of leverage is concentrating, accumulating, complementing, conserving and recovering resources in such a manner that the meagre resources, the gap or stretch is stretched to meet the aspirations that the organisation has envisaged. So the idea of stretch and leverage belongs to the learning school of strategy. Capabilities are not seen as constraints to achieving. The environment is not seen as given, but something which can be created and moulded. So Hamel and Prahalad considered that many managers understood strategy to mean fit, or the relationship between the company and its competitive environment, the allocation of resources amongst competing investment opportunities, and this kind of idea of a long-term perspective in which resource money figures prominently. They stress that being strategic actually implies a willingness to take the long view, and strategic investments mean betting bigger and betting earlier. So this view obscures the merits of alternatives in which the ideas of stretch, leverage and consistency of effort feature. Creating stretch, a misfit between resources and aspirations, is the single most important task for the senior manager. So under fit, strategic intent would seem more realistic, and under stretch and leverage, strategic intent is actually more realistic. So in both cases, it is essentially a desired aim to be achieved. Let's talk a bit more about Porter. We've discussed him in various sessions on this in this module, as he has a lot to say in the area of strategy. So he says, well, what is strategy? And he wrote that actually strategy is the creation of a unique and valuable position involving a different set of activities. But choosing a unique position is not enough to guarantee a sustainable advantage. Sustainability requires trade-offs with other possible positions for 3 reasons, and those reasons are eliminating or minimizing inconsistencies, maximizing and concentrating the benefits of a chosen position, recognizing and accepting the limits of coordination and control, and the essence of strategy is choosing what not to do. Without trade-offs, he says, there would be no need for choice and thus no need for strategy. So he talks about fit, and he considers strategic fit as the way that various components of a strategy fit together. And in this context, fit locks out imitators by creating a value chain that is as strong as its strongest link and is a more potent and central strategic concept. And he recognised 3 types of fit. So the fit as first order or simple consistency between activities, stretch, second order or reinforcing activities, and leverage, third order or activities which optimise organisational effort. In all 3, the whole is more than any individual part. Competitive advantage grows out of the entire system of tightly linked activities. So for challenges of this sort to be effective, top management has to create a sense of urgency, develop a competitor focus at every level through widespread use of computer intelligence, provide employees with the skills they need to work effectively, give the organisation time to digest one challenge before launching another, and establish clear milestones and review mechanisms. So this concludes this session, and hopefully now you have a much clearer idea on the tools and techniques that are used to analyse corporate portfolio. And I will see you in the final session in this module in session number 10. Thank you very much.